Pick up a chocolate bar, any brand. Look at it. It's smaller than it used to be. It cost more than it used to. And if you read the ingredients, there's a decent chance there's less actual cocoa in it than there was a few years ago. That is not your imagination, and it is not one greedy company. Behind that shrinking bar is one of the strangest economic stories of the decade, a slow-motion crisis you never see happening on the other side of the planet that ends right there in your hand. So let me pull the thread. In the next few minutes, I'll show you why chocolate is quietly disappearing, the collision of weather, disease, and poverty that broke it, the traders who poured fuel on the fire, and why the exact same thing is quietly happening to your coffee, your olive oil, and your orange juice. By the end, you will not look at a candy bar the same way again. Let's start with the number that broke an entire industry. For decades, generations really, cocoa was one of the most boring commodities on Earth. The price of a ton of cocoa beans sat, year after year, somewhere around $2,500. It barely moved. Then, in 2024, it went vertical. The price tore past 5,000, then 8, then blew through 10, and at the peak, more than $12,000 a ton. It didn't double. It quadrupled, and then kept going. A sleepy crop that hadn't done anything interesting in your entire lifetime suddenly started trading like a meme stock. And when the single raw ingredient of a $100 billion industry quadruples in price, it means something has broken all the way down at the root. You've already felt the aftershock, even if you didn't know its name. It's called shrinkflation. The bar gets a little thinner. The multi-pack quietly drops from 6 to 5. The recipe swaps cocoa for cheaper cocoa butter substitutes, or more nuts, more biscuit, more air. Some products that used to say chocolate now legally have to say chocolatey. Chocolate, a treat that's been cheap and everywhere for about 100 years, is quietly turning back into what it used to be, a luxury. So to understand why, you have to follow the bar backwards, away from the shiny wrapper, past the factory, all the way to where it actually begins. And it does not begin in a factory. It begins on a tree, a specific, fragile, tropical tree called Theobroma cacao, which, fun fact, translates to food of the gods. This tree is picky. It will only grow in a narrow band of hot, humid rainforest within about 10 degrees of the equator. Too dry, it fails. Too hot, it fails. Wrong soil, wrong rain, it fails. And here is the fragility that sets up this entire story. Roughly 70% of all the cocoa on the planet comes from West Africa, mostly 2 countries, Ivory Coast and Ghana. Think about that. The whole world's chocolate, every brand, every country, billions of people, largely depends on the weather and the health of the farms in essentially one corner of one continent. And who grows it? Not machines on giant industrial estates. Millions of small farmers, most of them working just a few acres by hand, cutting each pod off the trunk with a machete, scooping out the wet beans, fermenting them under banana leaves, drying them in the sun by the side of the road. It is hard, hot, manual work. And that army of small farmers in that one region is the foundation the entire global chocolate industry is balanced on top of. So when that foundation cracks, everything above it shakes. And starting in 2023, it didn't just crack. It got hit by everything at once. Let me stack up the layers because no single one of these caused the crisis. It was all of them landing together. Load 1. The weather. A powerful El Niño rolled through, and West Africa got the worst of it, punishing heat, then wildly erratic rainfall, then the harmattan, the dry, dusty wind that blows down off the Sahara. Cocoa trees, remember, are divas. They want steady, gentle, humid conditions. Instead, they got extremes in every direction. Flowers dropped, pods shriveled, harvests came in thin. Layer 2. Disease. 2 silent killers have been spreading through West Africa's farms for years. The first is black pod, a fungal rot that thrives in exactly the warm, wet conditions climate change is creating and can turn a healthy pod into black mush. The second is scarier, cacao swollen shoot virus, spread by tiny insects which slowly chokes the tree from the inside and eventually kills it. And here's the brutal part. There is no cure. Once a farm is badly infected, the only real fix is to rip out the trees, burn them, and start again from nothing. Which leads straight into layer 3, old trees and old farmers. A huge share of West Africa's cocoa trees are simply old, decades past their most productive years, yielding a little less with every season. Normally, farmers would replant with fresh, stronger, disease-resistant varieties. But they haven't. And to understand why, you have to look at layer 4, the one that quietly poisons everything else. Cocoa farming barely pays. And I mean barely. Most of the world's cocoa farmers live below the poverty line. A lot of them survive on the wrong side of $2 a day. Now hold that next to this. Out of the price of a finished chocolate bar in a rich country, the farmer who actually grew the beans typically receives just a few cents. A tiny sliver, often estimated at around 6% of the bar's value, flows all the way back to the person doing the hardest, hottest work in the whole chain. $100 billion global industry standing on the shoulders of some of the poorest workers on the planet. And once you see that, everything else makes sense. When a tree dies, there's no spare money to replant, and the new tree wouldn't pay you for 3 to 5 years anyway. When disease hits, there's no money for fungicide. And when a young person in a cocoa village looks at their parents breaking their backs for poverty wages, they don't see a future. They see a warning. So they leave for the city. The entire system had been running on empty for years, underinvested, aging, and quietly dying. 2024 wasn't the year the problem started. It was just the year the tank finally hit zero. Now, here's the twist that turned a bad few harvests into a historic, once-in-a-century price explosion. Because cocoa is not only a crop, it is also a financial instrument. Those beans get turned into contracts, cocoa futures, traded every day in London and New York. Some of the people trading them are chocolate companies, genuinely trying to lock in a price so they can plan. But a lot of the others are speculators, funds, traders, people who will never touch a single bean, who are simply betting on which way the price will go. So when the harvest numbers came in ugly, and it became obvious the world was short of cocoa, everyone stampeded in the same direction at once. Prices didn't rise. They erupted. And then, something almost poetic happened. The chocolate makers who hedge, who normally protect themselves by short-selling futures, suddenly found those bets going catastrophically against them. To cover their losses, some were forced to buy contracts back, which pushed the price even higher, which caused even bigger losses for the next company, which forced more buying. A doom loop. The market started eating itself. Billions in value whipping around, all ultimately because some trees in Ivory Coast didn't get enough rain. And here's the final cruelty. Those insane record prices? They mostly did not reach the farmers. In Ghana and Ivory Coast, the government fixes the price farmers get and sets it before the season even starts. So the world price flew to the moon while the price in the farmer's pocket stayed stuck on the ground. The result? Farmers got almost none of the windfall, and beans started getting smuggled across borders to wherever they'd fetch a few cents more. The people at the very root of the entire trillion-bean machine got the smallest piece of the biggest boom in its history. So the obvious question is, why not just fix it? Plant more trees, grow more cocoa, crash the price back down. Because you can't. A cocoa tree takes 3 to 5 years before it gives you a real harvest. You cannot conjure supply in a single season, no matter how high the price goes. Layer on top of that new European rules banning cocoa grown on freshly deforested land, genuinely good for the planet, but one more squeeze on available supply. And the climate that is slowly shrinking the narrow tropical belt where cocoa can grow at all, and you don't have a 1-year blip. You have a structural shortage. This is not a bad week for chocolate. This is the new normal. And now, zoom all the way out. Because here's the thing you really came for. Chocolate is not special. Chocolate is a preview. Pull out your last grocery receipt and look. Coffee. Arabica prices smashed into multi-year highs as drought hammered Brazil and Vietnam, the two giants that grow most of the world's beans. Olive oil. Prices hit records after historic droughts scorched Spain, which produces a huge chunk of the global supply. Orange juice. All-time record highs as disease and hurricanes gutted the orange groves of Florida. Vanilla, black pepper, even the humble onion in parts of the world. Same story, over and over. And it is always the same recipe. A crop that the whole world depends on, grown in just a handful of places by farmers who are paid far too little, on a planet that is getting hotter and wilder and less predictable. And then all of it amplified, sped up, and exaggerated by financial markets that can panic in an afternoon. Your morning coffee, your salad oil, your kid's chocolate bar. Every one of them sits at the very end of a long, thin, invisible thread stretched halfway around the world. And right now, a lot of those threads are fraying at the same time. So let's bring it all the way back to you. What does this actually mean for your life? 3 things. First, some of these price jumps are simply not coming back down. When the cause is structural, climate, disease, decades of underinvestment, the word temporary is just a comforting story we tell ourselves. Second, shrinkflation and reformulation are now permanent tools. You will increasingly pay the same money for less product or the same money for a quietly worse version of it, and you'll be trained not to notice. And third, the big one, the era of impossibly cheap, always available food that most of us grew up thinking was normal was never actually guaranteed. It quietly depended on 2 things: a stable climate and a farmer somewhere on Earth being willing to work incredibly hard for almost nothing. Both of those foundations are now shifting at the same time. So the next time you notice your chocolate bar has gotten a little smaller or your coffee a little pricier, you'll understand it's not just a brand being greedy in a vacuum. It's a signal. A message sent from a farm you will never see, along a thread you never knew was there, that runs all the way from a struggling tree near the equator, right into the palm of your hand. Now, if pulling this thread got your brain going, if you want to actually understand the forces underneath stories like this one, the tool I personally use is Brilliant. Brilliant teaches you the real machinery of the world: economics, probability, data, how complex systems actually behave. But instead of watching a lecture, you learn by doing. In short, interactive lessons you can finish in a few minutes a day, right from your phone. It's genuinely the best way I've found to build the kind of thinking that lets you spot these hidden patterns yourself, everywhere you look. You can try everything Brilliant has to offer free for a full 30 days, and the link in the description gives you an extra discount if you decide to keep going. Because understanding how the world really works might be the single best investment you will ever make. And unlike chocolate, it only gets cheaper. And that is the whole idea of this channel. You pull the thread on one ordinary, everyday thing, and the entire hidden machinery of the world comes tumbling out behind it. If this genuinely changed the way you see the stuff sitting in your kitchen right now, subscribe, because next time, we're pulling the thread on a bigger one. Why the rich keep getting richer. Not the anger, not the slogans, the actual mechanics of it. And the answer is simpler and a lot stranger than you'd think. I'll see you there.